Hello everyone, and welcome to another session of entitled People Karen Stories from Reddit. In this installment, picture a scenario where your child suffers from a life-threatening peanut allergy, and your new neighbor is adamant that the condition is purely psychological. Then, envision her appearing at a school function with a batch of homemade, supposedly safe cookies, smiling and asserting they were made specifically for him. Let's get started with the video. The entitled People Karen story begins as follows. To provide some background, I have a child with a severe peanut allergy. This isn't the kind where he gets a bit itchy after eating a Snickers. I'm referring to a serious, throat-closing, have an ambulance on standby type of allergy. We have managed this since his toddler years, and EpiPens are a constant attachment for us. There's one in my purse, one at his school, one in our car, and is now old enough to carry one himself. This is not mere paranoia, we've had to use them in the past. He wouldn't be with us today without that small injection of epinephrine, a fact our entire family understands, which explains the sheer quantity of EpiPens we keep accessible. Consequently, our entire existence operates under a state of quiet, constant alert. We almost exclusively prepare meals at home, are incredibly diligent about reading labels, and our son knows better than to accept food from anyone without checking first. Even then, he understands to only take it from an adult he trusts. His school has emergency protocols established, it's an entire system. It is tiring, but it's effective and ensures his safety, which is our ultimate goal. We were thrilled when we purchased this house. It is located in one of those tranquil suburban neighborhoods with perfectly manicured lawns, where the HOA circulates newsletters about potlucks and community events every 2 weeks, and children ride their bikes in small groups through driveways and streets. It truly felt like the ideal spot to put down roots. For the most part, it has been. Neighbors wave as you drive past, there's always someone out with their dog, and the elementary school is so close I don't need to worry about bus schedules or driving my son in the morning. However, as I've come to realize, every neighborhood has that neighbor. We just so happen to end up living right next to ours. She moved in several months after we did, just 2 houses away. A retired nurse, single and in her mid-60s, she initially appeared friendly enough. She would engage in conversation in that lonely, I want to chat for 20 minutes about my cat's digestive health manner. I genuinely felt a bit sorry for her, so I would talk with her occasionally when we crossed paths on walks. At first, I thought she was harmless. Also, guys, if you ever want to talk about my cat's digestive health, I'm always open for a discussion. Perhaps a little inquisitive, the kind of person to peer through the blinds and scrutinize your children playing in the yard, but nothing too significant. That perception shattered about 5 minutes into our first real conversation. During that initial exchange beyond simple greetings, she launched into a tirade about how children today are excessively coddled and how, in her time, no one suffered from allergies. I gently pointed out that my own child has a serious peanut allergy, so we exercise considerable caution. She gave me a look, a completely deadpan stare, that clearly conveyed she considered me a fool. Then, she stated, I was a nurse for 30 years. Those allergies are all in people's heads, and big companies want you to buy their placebo medicine. Parents simply enable it. I held back my response and smiled, not wanting to engage in a debate with someone whose medical opinions were formed by WebMD and Facebook. I decided it was fine, she was opinionated, but it wasn't as if we would interact daily. Neighbor or not, she wasn't a central part of my life. But then it became a recurring issue. Whenever she saw me with my child, she felt compelled to comment. If he wore his allergy bracelet, she would roll her eyes after I explained its purpose to her once. If I mentioned we brought our own snacks to a block party, she would scoff and say, "Oh, for goodness sake. Live a little." At one neighborhood barbecue, she proclaimed loudly for everyone to hear, allergies are just the newest trend. Parents love pretending their kids are special. My son was standing right there. His face turned crimson as he looked down at his feet, and I could swear I saw him physically diminish. I wanted to lose my temper with her, but I didn't want to cause him further embarrassment, so I simply said, "It's not fake. Please stop." She just laughed. "I work in hospitals. I know the truth. Lady, you likely spent the majority of your career instructing people to provide urine samples and monitoring for drips, but yes, of course, you're an immunology expert. I didn't even know her nursing specialty or if she had truly been a nurse at all. Given the volume of misinformation she spouted at any moment, I could believe she was fabricating her past career for some reason. After that barbecue, I began to notice other strange occurrences. On one occasion, I found a scattering of peanut shells in our yard. It happened once or twice, but I dismissed it. I reasoned it might be birds or perhaps other neighborhood kids eating snacks. But then it continued to happen. One morning, I even discovered an open, half-empty jar of peanut butter by our fence. There was no utensil, no lid, it was just sitting there. It felt intentional, and a small part of me started to suspect something was amiss. I told myself I was being paranoid, yet in the back of my mind, I knew she had made enough remarks that I couldn't rule her out. So, I started inspecting the yard before allowing my son to play outside. I would clean up whatever I found and hoped that would be the end of it. But then came the bake sale. The school holds one annually as a fundraiser for field trips and supplies. Parents contribute baked goods, everything is labeled, and children use their quarters to buy cookies to raise the necessary funds for the school. We consistently make our own allergy-safe items to donate, and my son typically sticks to eating what we've brought. It's a safe, simple, and familiar system. But guess who decided to participate this year? That's correct. That one neighbor. She made a grand spectacle about baking special allergy-safe cookies because, in her words, no child should feel excluded. She informed anyone who would listen that her background in healthcare meant she knew precisely what she was doing. People thought it was a kind gesture and that she was finally changing her perspective. As for me, I had an unshakable, bad feeling in my stomach, but I foolishly chose to give her the benefit of the doubt. Still, as a precaution, I approached the organizer privately and said, "Hey, just be certain everything here is clearly labeled. My son's allergy is severe." She nodded and reassured me that all would be fine. On the day of the sale, the neighbor arrived with a tray of perfectly normal-looking cookies. They were chocolate chip, homemade, well-presented, and very clearly labeled peanut-free. She announced loudly that they were peanut-free, made specifically for our son. I didn't trust her, but I wanted to. I asked her point-blank, "No peanut products?" She placed a hand on her chest as if I had accused her of a heinous crime. "Of course not. I would never. I'm not a monster." Here is the part that breaks my heart. My son believed her. She was an adult, a neighbor he recognized, someone who was smiling and telling him she had made something special just for him. He took a cookie, and within minutes, his face began to swell. Hives broke out, and he couldn't breathe. The word panic fails to capture what I felt. I grabbed the EpiPen from my bag, administered it to his thigh, and yelled for someone to call 911. People started shouting, clearing a space, and a teacher ran over. It was pure chaos. The ambulance arrived quickly, thank goodness. They administered oxygen, another injection, and we were rushed to the hospital. He remained under observation overnight. He is okay now, but only because we had the EpiPen and received immediate medical help. Without it, he could have died right there at a school fundraiser. All because of a cookie the neighbor made for him. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed what I had suspected all along, peanut exposure. I confronted my neighbor the following day, and she feigned shock, suggesting that perhaps my son had panicked himself into having a reaction. It was at that moment I knew with certainty that she had done it intentionally. As I started to investigate, the details began to align. Other parents informed me they had overheard her at school drop-off, boasting about how she intended to prove the allergy was fake. Someone else noted she had been posting in a Facebook group about parents who invent medical conditions. The police, rightfully, became involved. They took statements from everyone they could locate, gathered evidence, and retrieved her social media posts. And what do you think they discovered? posts in which she explicitly wrote about wanting to expose fraudulent allergies by surreptitiously adding peanuts to safe food, discussing how this conspiracy needed to be exposed once and for all. The neighbor was, of course, arrested. It was a surreal experience to watch her being handcuffed in front of her house as half the neighborhood stood by, whispering. Yet, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction seeing her escorted into the police car. I was, naturally, the one who had called the police, and I pressed charges. I attended every single hearing, making sure my voice was heard, as I was not going to allow her to get away with some I didn't know excuse. In addition to the criminal case, we filed a civil lawsuit. We claimed damages and sought repayment for hospital bills, emotional distress, and punitive damages. She contested it, naturally, but her attorney must have advised her that her chances were slim, because she ultimately settled. We're not wealthy now, but let's just say my son's college fund received a significant contribution, all financed by the woman who attempted to poison him. The neighborhood immediately turned against her after the incident. She was no longer invited to events, and people would look away when she tried to wave for a daily chat. Parents kept their children away from her. She couldn't even take her dog for a walk without drawing whispers. She endured this for about 2 months before selling her house and vanishing, apart from her required court appearances. On the legal front, she accepted a plea agreement. She served some time in jail, followed by probation, and is permanently banned from volunteering at schools. Do I feel any remorse? Not in the slightest. She could have killed my child, all to prove a point. Now, months later, my son is back to his usual self. He's still cautious, still carries his EpiPen, but is doing fine. We've discussed it extensively, how some people refuse to accept things they don't comprehend. He will be stronger because of this, but I despise that he had to learn this lesson in such a manner. So, that's the story of how I watched my neighbor get arrested for attempting to poison my child. And frankly, I don't regret for a moment ensuring she faced every possible consequence. I love my son and would protect him with my life. Actions have consequences, a lesson my neighbor learned thoroughly. Our next story is an excellent tale of malicious compliance titled, "If You Want More Money, Then Leave." And by the way, if you're enjoying these stories about entitled individuals receiving their just desserts, please remember to like the video, as it helps me out immensely. A few years back, I began a new job. My manager encouraged me to obtain my license with the promise of a promotion to assistant manager. Over the years, I had proven my capabilities and earned the title of assistant to the manager, ensuring the office ran without a hitch. The catch, however, was that licensure required a bachelor's degree. So, I returned to an online community college to complete my associate's degree, followed by an online college to earn my bachelor's. I am set to graduate later this year and will have met all other prerequisites to sit for the state exam in December. Well, in early spring, my manager began to plant seeds of doubt, suggesting that the assistant manager position would not be available under the current ownership, as the new owners felt the company wasn't large enough to warrant such roles. So, instead of the anticipated $20,000 plus raise that came with the increased title and responsibilities, I was informed that a $6,000 raise was more likely, as the company typically offers higher pay to employees in other departments who have completed higher education. This then devolved into the statement that without a title change, no pay increase beyond the standard was possible, followed by the fateful words, "If you want more money, you will have to leave." Understood, boss. Aside from a general dislike for being misled, I had taken on some small student loans to finance my bachelor's. An additional income was necessary to begin repayment after graduation. I gave my resume to a colleague in my field, asking them to consider me for any openings they might hear about, anticipating a response late this year or early next. However, in early June, just a couple of weeks after contacting my colleague, I found myself in interviews for a new job I hadn't even applied for. A couple of weeks later, I accepted an offer that exceeded the proposed $6,000 raise. I actually witnessed a real-life shocked Pikachu face when I informed my manager I was resigning. They never saw it coming. I was considerate and gave a notice period longer than the industry standard. Although the new job involves a slightly longer commute, I am much more content at the new company. I've also heard through the grapevine that my replacement is still finding it difficult to manage even the most basic aspects of my former role. The next one is a particularly interesting petty revenge story titled, "I Found Out My Husband and Dearest Friend Were Having an Affair." My ex-husband and I first met when our best friends got married. He was the best man, and I was the maid of honor. A couple of years later, we all resided in the same community and had our 4 children around the same time. We retained my friend, whom we'll call Hobart, as the attorney for our business when we were considering selling franchises. Hobart and my ex, whom we'll call Doc, spent many late nights finalizing contracts and other matters. One July, they had to travel to New York for a week to interview potential franchisees. Her ex-husband contacted me to inform me that he had hired a private investigator who had followed them and observed them acting very affectionately, noting they had booked only 1 hotel room. Well, as it was a sizzling July, the front right window of her minivan was open by about 2 inches. I took the initiative to puree a few raw shrimp with chicken broth and strained out the solid parts. Next, I carefully threaded a long tube down into her rear passenger side carpet, getting it as far under the seat as I could. I chose not to target the front seat because it was protected by removable mats. I then slowly funneled about half a cup of my concoction through the tube. You should know that the temperature that week exceeded 90 Fahrenheit every single day. The result was ghastly, a true triumph. Her husband and I did not reveal our knowledge of the affair until we had both consulted with every reputable lawyer in our city and had all our financial affairs in order. It was petty but effective revenge that I do not regret. Now, let's proceed to the next story. It begins this way. I was always aware that an HOA could be malicious or careless with the money we entrust to them. But their complete disregard for the safety of the residents was something I had not anticipated. I can see it now, of course, but back when my son was 10, his life was permanently ruined because of my HOA. Our community has a playground, which was constructed to provide a safe place for our children to play, away from the streets. It's a spacious area with an open field and the usual playground equipment. It was close enough for us to walk a few blocks and be there, eliminating the need for extensive planning for a day out. I had taken him there 100 times before that fateful day, so it didn't feel any different. He adored the swings, and upon seeing that the playground was quiet and they were available, he was ecstatic to run over and sit on one. The moment he sat down, I heard the overhead bar snap, followed by the sound of his scream as it crashed down on him. It came straight down onto his head and face. My entire body went cold as I saw him lying injured and silent on the ground. I was terrified to even check if he was breathing and hysterically called for an ambulance. They arrived to take him, and we headed to the hospital. In that moment, my only focus was my son and ensuring he would be all right. He required approximately 5 surgeries due to the injuries caused by the metal bar. His skull was fractured, and he suffered a concussion, a broken nose, a broken eye socket, and more. Our primary concern was the potential for brain damage, which we wouldn't know the extent of until he regained consciousness. He did sustain some brain damage, but thankfully, it was not too severe. However, his life would never be the same. He was left blind in one eye and constantly suffered from pain in his head or face. School, which he had previously loved, became a torment for him because he couldn't keep up in class, and the surrounding noise exacerbated his headaches. We made the choice to withdraw him and arrange for private homeschooling with tutors who could accommodate his needs. His short-term memory is terrible, even after all these years. It wasn't until the initial shock subsided that I even considered why the bar had fallen. I approached the HOA to discuss the broken equipment and inquire about the last inspection. They evaded all my questions and instead began to turn the situation against me, accusing me of seeking a lawsuit to cover medical bills. They suggested it was likely his fault and that they were not obligated to provide me with any information. Legally, they weren't. So, I hired a lawyer who would either get the answers from them or uncover the information independently. What ensued was a 2-year lawsuit and investigation that revealed the depth of the HOA's negligence. You can be certain I was suing them for a significant amount of money, but it was about more than just paying for my son's medical care. His entire life was devastated, and he will never be able to live independently without assistance. No one should be allowed to simply walk away from that kind of responsibility. Before the case went to trial, my lawyer managed to gather a wealth of crucial information. It was discovered that the equipment was over a year overdue for an inspection and that the last report had advised the HOA that the parts required better maintenance and would likely need replacement within 6 months. They had no defense against the fact that it was their duty to maintain the park and all its contents, as our HOA dues funded it. Suddenly, with this information public, they began making desperate attempts to offer us a settlement, a paltry sum of money that meant nothing. To compound matters, when my lawyer insisted they close the park until it could be properly maintained, they refused. We had to involve the police to get the area shut down. It was unsafe, and more accidents could have easily occurred, but they simply did not care. I was not going to accept a settlement. I wanted to take them to court, where they would be forced to accept responsibility. I won't detail all the evidence we had against them, but I will share the excuses they attempted to use. They tried to claim that a 10-year-old boy is naturally rough and that misuse of the equipment could cause it to break. They attempted to portray my son as some sort of troublemaker and me as an irresponsible mother who wasn't supervising him, as if I didn't already blame myself enough and wish I had been standing closer to pull him away in time. Then, their lawyer argued that just because something breaks does not mean it was their fault. Things break, and accidents happen, which doesn't necessitate a lawsuit. Everything they argued was overshadowed by their lack of inspections and disregard for safety. I believe 2 key points swayed the outcome. The first was the discussion of my son's injuries and the lifelong challenges he will face due to an incident that could and should have been prevented by the HOA. The second was pointing out that right beside that swing set was another one, designed for babies, with the exact same type of overhead bar. If that one had broken, the trial would have been about something far more tragic than what happened to my son. In fact, a full inspection of the park's equipment, conducted as part of the proceedings, revealed that many pieces were rusted or were missing screws and bolts. It was gross negligence on the part of the HOA, and the court concurred. They were ordered to pay us $20 million, a sum that would make most people jump for joy if won in court. For me, I was just relieved that they were found at fault and held accountable. I was aware that this amount would bankrupt them and likely lead to the dissolution of the HOA, meaning the loss of the park and a gym they funded. I was indifferent to all of that. My only concern was my son and the future he would have. He is a teenager now, and while some things, like the scars, have healed, the reminder is always there. There are nights I have to hold him because he can't sleep due to the pain, ongoing revision surgeries and scans, and the fact that I no longer have to worry about his medical expenses or his long-term care is a massive weight off my shoulders. Honestly, HOAs require greater oversight from local governments, something to prevent situations like this from occurring in the first place. Making HOAs pay or seeking revenge against them is one thing, but I genuinely believe there needs to be a significant change to stop this from being a problem at all. And you can be sure that over these years, I have not been idle. Instead, I have been contacting every member of my local government to advocate for measures to be put in place and to strip power from HOAs. And the next one is another petty revenge story titled, "I Disgusted My Food Thieving Roommate." My roommate was stealing my food and not only refusing to admit it but also apparently boasting about it to my other roommates and calling me a pushover. I had no desire to get involved in whatever game they thought they were playing, especially since I'm moving out in 2 months. However, I do want my food. So, today, they were all in the kitchen chatting. I entered, took my meatballs from the refrigerator, and licked each one individually while maintaining direct eye contact with the thief. Then, I proceeded to lick several other items and spat into my milk. It was a waste of milk, but fortunately, there wasn't much left. She looked absolutely disgusted and eventually asked, "Are you mental?" I calmly replied, "I always do this, didn't you know," and then walked out. I'm not sure if she will stop, but the look on her face, a mixture of disgust and horror, made it all worthwhile. Update: the current status is as follows. None of my food was stolen today. I will provide another update if anything else gets stolen, but if you don't see any further updates, it means I have won. And with that, everyone, thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe, and I will see you again.